Good morning, AWS, and welcome to the AWS Morning Brief. I'm cloud economist Corey Quinn. Let's get started. But first, this episode is sponsored in part by Trend Micro Cloud One. It's a security services platform for organizations building in the cloud. It's also an automated, flexible, all-in-one solution to protect workflows and containers with cloud-native security. But to you, it's more time to focus on what you do best: building great applications and ideally avoiding Kubernetes. To learn more, visit snark.cloud/trendmicro. That's snark.cloud/trendmicro. Now, what happened last week in the wide world of AWS? In an effort to lose your data, Amazon Kinesis Data Firehose now supports data delivery to MongoDB Cloud. And because none of these AWS announcements are allowed to reference competitors to one another in the same post, there are 4 different posts to mention that this delivers to Mongo Cloud, New Relic, Datadog, and HTTP endpoints, which of course compete with all of the other 3. Announcing preview for Amazon RDS, M6G, and R6G instance types, powered by AWS Graviton2 processors. I'm not entirely sure that Intel has a future in the AWS ecosystem, judging by the price performance we're starting to see from these things. It's a database engine. The underlying processor architecture poses 0 compatibility issues for any customer workloads. They're also launching a number of D variants of their EC2 instances now, which give you localized NVMe disks for fast I/O on volumes that you will lose as soon as the instance goes away. AWS Code Build now supports parallel and coordinated executions of a build project. That's right, the run a single container serverlessly on a schedule service that's good now supports doing this to multiple containers. It's replacing Fargate piece by piece. Speaking of Fargate, AWS Fargate for Amazon ECS, that's a terrible full name, now supports UDP load balancing with Network Load Balancer. That's right, you can now use NLBs to easily load balance your Route 53 databases for ECS workloads should you need to do so. Introducing AWS Purchase Order Management. The hard problem in enterprise computing is never cache invalidation or naming. Instead, it's moving a dollar from one company to another. Update: Elastic Load Balancing Code Change. AWS is attempting to scare the bejesus out of everyone with that headline, but no. The code that they're changing is the billing code that it shows up in your bill with, not your production code. Amazon Fraud Detector is now generally available. You're, of course, forbidden by the terms of service from running Amazon Fraud Detector on your AWS bill. Speaking of AWS bills, this episode is sponsored by Chaos Search. That's right. If you're tired of running Elasticsearch or Elk entirely, which frankly you probably should be, consider Chaos Search. The data lives in your S3 buckets, and they can economically save you a boatload, not just on processing the hundreds of gigabytes all the way up to petabyte range of data, but in time your engineers spend managing your horrible existing Elk stack. Take a look, chaossearch.io, to learn more. Announcing the new AWS Community Builders program. If you're interested in starting an AWS community of some kind, AWS would like to hear from you. So would I. So if you're interested in starting an AWS community, please reach out. There are so many things I would have done differently when I started doing something that looked like that, if I had only known. Announcing the AWS Deep Composer Chartbusters Spin the Model Challenge. This sounds way easier than AWS PR's Spin the Narrative Challenge. Apparently seems to be, given how frequently they seem to be dropping balls lately. Testing a PR2 robot in a simulated hospital world. This looks amazing, but I can't get the robot to fire its weapon, so if anyone's having any luck with that, please reach out and let me know. Customer update. AWS and the EU/US Privacy Shield. All is well, is what AWS is saying about an issue in which all is most assuredly not well. This is a great argument in favor of using cloud providers for regulatory reasons, because they are solving problems that you won't have to yourself. But dear God, talk to your compliance people. before trusting what your vendors say. And lastly, over 150 AWS services now have a security chapter. Here's a collection of links to over 150 chapters of security need-to-knows about our services. Definitely says something both about AWS's continued commitment to security, as well as some of the problems with it. And that's what happened last week in AWS. I am cloud economist Corey Quinn, and this is the AWS Morning Brief. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Whereas if you've hated this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts anyway, along with a comment telling me exactly why I'm wrong about having a robot firing weapons inside of a hospital.
This has been a Humble Pod production. Stay humble.